Hello, welcome back to Meraki Unboxed. My name's Simon Thompson, host of the show, and we're at episode number 74. I can hardly believe it. We've been doing this for almost 3 years now, and we're having a great time doing it. We love interviewing other Merakians, but also guests from our customers, our partner community, our technology partners as well. And, we really have put together, I think, a whole bunch of really great material. So if you're not already a subscriber, well, you know the routine. If you've got your favorite podcast app open on your phone or your device of choice, just hit that subscribe button. We'd love to get these episodes out to you. And we do so every 2 weeks. So we maintain quite a good cadence here. A lot of content to get through. And in this episode, we're going on to some technology. And we really want to make sure that we're keeping you abreast of what we're doing on the technology front as we advance forwards, because it never stops. And our focus on this episode is all on Wi-Fi. We have now got a brand new extension to our Wi-Fi 6 standard, and we're really excited to get into talking about that today. And to help me with that discussion, I would like to welcome back to the podcast, Sunmeel. How are you doing, Sunmeel?
Hey Simon, thank you. Doing great. Enjoying the California weather. I really appreciate coming back to this forum.
I can't remember what the topic was that we touched on last time. Can you?
Um, I believe it was around Wi-Fi 6, if I'm not wrong, or maybe Meraki Health. It was one of those two. It's been a while.
Meraki Health actually rings a bell. So that's actually a really, really nice feature we implemented on the Meraki dashboard for monitoring the health of those networks. That was a one, I think, definitely. I can't remember the episode number, though. So if we dig back through the description, I'm sure you'll find it. Sunmeel, tell us about yourself. Let's remind us who you are. What do you do for Meraki?
So I've been with Meraki for almost 5 years now. I've recently taken on the role of the leader for the product management team for the wireless products. And I've been doing all things wireless at Meraki. And recently, the team has been busy with creating quite a buzz with the new Wi-Fi 60 standard and our new our new product that we are launching.
Yes, we are certainly going to be hearing all about that. I think the reason we wanted to put this episode together is because I think we've been it feels like only yesterday we were talking about Wi-Fi 6, and we're already now talking about Wi-Fi 6E. So we wanted to just really spend a bit of time understanding what has changed and just what new opportunities that opens up for our customers, and really just how it moves the whole story of Wi-Fi forwards. This technology now has been with us for 25 years, I think, at this point, for Wi-Fi thereabouts. And it's amazing how many standards iterations we've been through. But it's that the performance now is such that I don't see many people plugging in anymore. So it really needs to be good, and especially needs to be good in those high density settings. So to help us understand the context of this, Wi-Fi 6, when did that come in? That was about 3 years ago, thereabouts. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe Wi-Fi 6 showed up in the 2018-2019 timeframe. At about that time, the product started to show up. And you're right. I think it's been a fairly quick technology change with 6E, but it's not a whole lot that has changed. There's an addition. I think more importantly, that's the important key takeaway. It's not a standard change. It's actually expanding the standard
Right.
into a brand new spectrum with Wi-Fi 6E.
Yes, I did see that, and I that was a really important point, because it's so easy. We get lazy with our language, all of us, and so it's easy to think that 6E is a new standard. It's not a new standard. It's an extension to the standard. We did the same thing with Wi-Fi 5, I believe, right? We had Wave 1 and Wave 2, which are basically just versions of the same standard once again. So what's the history of this? Like, what drove 6E to come into existence?
So, FCC opened up some additional spectrum for us, which was 1200 megahertz. Um, And that has happened, I think, only twice in the history of Wi-Fi. The first one was when FCC allowed the use of 5 gigahertz spectrum
Hmm.
for Wi-Fi, and that happened in, I believe, early 2000s. And here we are in 2022, when the FCC has allowed additional spectrum. Well, they did not approve in 2022, but we are in 2022 now. It happened, a few months or maybe a year ago. So uh, definitely there was new spectrum approved. And to give you information of how big that was, today 5 gigahertz uses up to, I believe, 800 megahertz of spectrum. And in the 6 gigahertz, FCC has allowed 1200 megahertz of spectrum, so
Mm.
even more capacity. This has now been adopted, I believe, in more than 40 countries, and they're starting to allow more and more spectrum as well. Um, if you look at the Meraki documentation around 6E, you can see a link to the WFA website to where they document which countries are allowing how much spectrum.
Right, and that is important to know because, of course, we do have an international audience here, and yes, it's true. Here in the US and a couple of other countries, I think we've got that full 1200 megahertz of spectrum available there. This 6 gigahertz thing is important, though, isn't it? Because, like you said, we made that transition from 2.4 to 5 gigahertz, and I'm old enough to have remembered that fairly clearly, actually, still. And we had all kinds of fun getting client devices move forward, and that's one of the really interesting ones because we're now at the stage of doing that all over again. We're doing it with AX, so that's Wi-Fi 6, and still to this day, not a huge number of client devices. I think Apple's made that move, but a lot of other vendors are still in the process of updating their chipsets to support Wi-Fi 6. And here we are once again. We're talking about another completely different set of spectrum to support that. So, it's clear that we move things forward on the infrastructure side before client devices, but this is huge, right? This spectrum is pretty amazing, what they've added.
It's definitely huge. And I think we jokingly say, you know how the industry used to treat 20 and 40 megahertz and 5 gigahertz spectrum channel widths. Now we're saying that, maybe 40 megahertz becomes the new 20 and 80 megahertz becomes the new 40. Or I believe it was 80 megahertz becomes the new 20 and 160 megahertz becomes the new 40 because there's just so much bandwidth allowed, and there's just so much, RF space that you can use.
Right. And that's huge again for those high density environments. We always, of course, think about enterprises, but there are plenty of other use cases. We'll come on to the use cases a little bit later on. But yeah, it's exciting. And I do remember with 2.4, I mean, to this day, it's still used quite extensively, but because it was the early, most widely adopted standard, it got super congested. And so I remember the early days of 5 gigahertz, how excited I was to be in this kind of free air that felt like it was completely unspoiled. Nobody else was in there. Everybody else was messing around trying to compete with each other on 2.4, and there I was on 5 gig. And I guess we got to that point where even with 5 gig, it's getting more and more saturated all the time, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what this is going to bring us, and it's amazing, really. Again, for the FCC to have opened up so much additional spectrum. I mean, that's quite a big jump from where we were at before. So we sort of touched on why we need this thing. Why do we actually care about advancing the standard onwards? It does sound like it's a lot to do with congestion and availability. We're always wanting everything to be faster. We're more and more reliant on Wi-Fi. So talk about some of the other advances that have happened with 6E. Beyond the bandwidth, what else is this extension to the standard bringing us?
So there's a few things to keep in mind with 6E. Security is one key aspect that you have to keep in mind. Till Wi-Fi 6, I think WPA3 was optional. WPA2 was fairly standard in the industry, and WPA3 was optional. But with 6E on 6 gigahertz, what the standards body has said is you have to use WPA3, and
Right.
that makes it more secure. So basically, there's more security embedded now that you will have to adhere to. The other thing you keep mentioning about congestion, one of the biggest challenges that we've had in Wi-Fi 1 or Prime through 6, if you're keeping track of all the names, is that it has always been backward compatible. It
Yes.
has its pros and cons. While that means the slower devices can also slow you down, but also that means you have a broader impact or coverage as well. But with Wi-Fi 6, they have said that, you have to support Wi-Fi 6 only, and in 6 gigahertz, you cannot be backwards compatible. So there's a couple of points to keep in mind about, the support for the technology in the 6 gigahertz spectrum.
So
Um,
just to be clear on that, the leaving behind of backwards compatibility, is that 6E or was that with 6?
That is specific to 6E. So
Right.
with Wi-Fi 6, you use the same technology, albeit in the 5 gigahertz. And there, you support Wi-Fi 1 through 5 as well. But when you go to 6E, it's basically the same technology used in 6 gigahertz. That's limited only to Wi-Fi 6.
Right. Got it. Okay. So security, and we've talked there about the backwards compatibility. Anything else we've missed?
Um, Not really. You know what? As I mentioned, 80 is the new 20 and
Right.
160 is the new 40. Just to quantify this, there are 14 new 80 megahertz channels, and there are 7 new 160 megahertz channels. So
Right.
that's a whole lot to put that 1200 megahertz in perspective. Once again, all of this is documented in our 6E FAQ on the Meraki documentation website. So, customers or anybody that, just wants to get more information can look at the documentation as well.
So, I mean, that's good to know, and wonderful that we have that documentation ready to go. So, good place, and we'll come back to that, and we'll include that at the end as well, because we want to make sure that everybody who's listening, who's interested in this, gets an opportunity to have all the questions answered that they may have about this new extension to the standard. I'm really being careful not to say new standard as we go through this. We touched on this a little bit, but who needs this? It sounds like everybody might benefit from it in some way, but who do we think of as the people who are really going to benefit the most from this additional spectrum?
I think there's a few different ways where this will come up. One of the use cases that comes up is high density. There's a wide need for capacity in the venues, and now especially after the pandemic, now everybody's going to come back to the games. Everybody wants to post those pictures and tell the world that they're mobile too, maybe, and post things on Instagram or Facebook. And so that means real capacity is needed. For concert halls, they might be streaming something or some experiences that they want to enable that might need the additional capacity. So in places like these, as the newer phones come out with the technology supported, it enables additional capacity for you. That's just one way of looking at it. One of the other use cases is if you think about some of the larger enterprises, right? Everybody's returning back to office, but I think we all have seen enough articles that have said the workplace is definitely changed forever. It's going to be hybrid. What that means is before, when you join meetings remotely, people used to have their cameras turned off. I was just talking to someone about this. Now the etiquette has changed. People actually apologize if their cameras are not turned on.
Right,
So there's
true.
an implicit assumption that you should have cameras turned on when you're joining a meeting virtually, be that at your desk or at your home. What that means is even if you're doing that from your office, from your desk, um, that latency requirement is there. The needs for the network are there. Customers are probably thinking about going fully mobile. Some customers are already doing it, but now for the larger masses, thinking about that OS upgrades happening over Wi-Fi. Those are large files you're trying to move. So the capacity requirements are really going up. And not just enterprises. If you think about some of virtual learning, they might also come under enterprises, but virtual learning. Um, those are the kind of experiences that you have to think about. And for larger enterprises, that means you need more capacity, and 6C can help solve some of those. The devices will start to show up, hopefully, later in the year, once the supply chain crisis is relatively under control. God
Right.
knows when, but that's definitely one area. And then if you really think about higher ed, people are also coming back to classes. I split it out from enterprise because, higher ed may have some different requirements, but um, that's one area. And some retail. Metaverse is taking off. I think everybody's hearing about the metaverse. You may be, retail vendors may want to provide some experiences there. If you think about Best Buy, if they're trying to sell, AR, VR gadgets, they want to enable those experiences. And to have those 4K experiences, you really have to provide, that capacity.
Right.
And to power those 4K experiences, you need that capacity. So these are a few ways that, customers may think about, deploying and needing the technology.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's very easy when you get used to your tools. You think, okay, well, I've got everything I'm ever going to need. This is fine. But then the quality of it steadily increases over time. You get a faster computer. It has a better quality webcam that drives more data requirement. I've noted myself because I've been shopping recently for a laptop, and I noted that there's all these differences in the cameras built in, but the standards are getting higher and higher. So it's more and more throughput all the time, and so all of this in aggregate, you can see what kind of difference it makes. I mean, even software updates. I just, they're getting really big now. The size of some of these software updates we receive on our devices, huge. And if you think about the impact across an enterprise situation or a high density Wi-Fi deployment, it's a big deal. So it's sort of like you're leapfrogging all the time and just trying to stay ahead of it as much as you can. With that. So those are great ones. And like you said, metaverse and this augmented reality technology, I mean, it's really exciting what's coming. And then this hybrid office situation that we're not going to go back to exactly the way it was before. But the people who are on site are going to be driving more data than they were before because they've got to connect to all the people who are working remotely. So there's going to be more video flying around your network. And once again, everybody's doing it wirelessly, so here comes the Wi-Fi once again. All right. Well, thank you for sharing those. And as with all technology, there's always going to be a few challenges, bits and pieces that we need to think about as well. So any kind of gotchas that we should share around how easy it is to deploy this? I mean, I think we want to talk about our actual implementation of it ourselves, our own product, and maybe that's where we pivot to that.
Yeah, so I'll first talk about some of the things to be aware of with this technology, because that's really important, because that really guides some of the design thinking, and there's a few things there. So first of all, you cannot deploy 6 gigahertz at the max power that the standard allows. I think there's a tiered system there. So there's a low power mode and there's a standard power mode. Low power mode, I believe is at around 17 dBm. That's available, and low power mode can be used on indoor APs without external antennas. The keyword is without. So APs have to be integrated. The antennas have to be integrated.
Right.
And that's important because when you're looking at deploying some of these APs, what power you can use and can you use 6 gigahertz is extremely important. Now, that brings the question, what about outdoor antennas, or what about APs with external antennas? So for APs with external antennas or outdoor APs need a system which we refer to as AFC system, which is automated frequency coordination. Um, we're working closely with the standards body and following the developments, but that AFC system isn't finalized yet.
Right.
So today in the market, you will see mostly APs with integrated antennas that can be used indoors. And the reason for this is 6 gigahertz has some licensed spectrum that is used outside. And we want to ensure that there's no interference with those spectrum, with those deployments.
Right.
And so we've kept the TX power capped for indoor, and for outdoor and external antennas, we want to be more cautious, or the industry or FCC or the regulatory bodies want to be more cautious as they approve regulations for those. So you'll hear more updates as again, all of this is documented in our documentation. And that brings us to how easy it is to deploy. I've already talked about the security aspect, so I'm not going to cover that again. But when it comes to ease of deployment, I think with Meraki, 6E is going to be the same experience, effortless, zero touch experience that we want to enable it for our customers.
Hmm.
And yes, we have the same thing with 6E. We have extended that.
I'm excited to hear about the actual product itself. Albeit this is an audio only podcast, we're still going to describe it in as much detail as we can, and it's good to know about that power thing as well, because my recollection is that that's also part of what varies internationally, and so different countries may have different approaches to both the frequencies you're allowed to use, but also the power levels that you're allowed to use. So it does sound like an important part of getting that right.
Yes, and that's where some of the ease of deployment comes into picture, right? Like Meraki ships a single SKU worldwide, and the power limits, all of that is managed through the cloud and made available.
Hmm.
And so, if and when regulatory changes change, we keep track of that and we make it available to our customers through our
Right.
cloud model.
Right. That's right. You just select the country that you're deploying it in, right? That's it, and the
Yep.
cloud does the rest.
Yep. And with that, I think we talked about the product or having a new product. We recently, announced our new Wi-Fi 6E Premier Access Point, which is the MR57.
Mm.
That's the first 6E access point that we're launching with. And if you haven't, check out YouTube with the promo video. We're really excited. It's a cool video. I loved it. I probably watched it hundreds of times already to see how that AP is, the shape and the form factor. There's quite a few things,
It's
that are
changed.
actually coming with the AP.
The design has changed, hasn't it? So we Meraki, I think we've had, this is our third significant, really significant design format. Like the early APs were in a sort of a portrait rectangle, then we shifted to a more of a landscape rectangle, and now it looks sort of a bit square. Is it square?
It is more square, yes. It has a more squarish look and feel. But there's a reason why.
Mm.
Because we are moving over to using a universal mount on the APs, and with that we have to take some design considerations. But it's not just any universal mount. We are actually moving over to support the Cisco universal mount, which has been used for the last 15
Oh
years
wow.
or maybe even more. I don't even remember when that thing was launched. It's pretty old. Um, but I think a lot of customers deploy Cisco APs, and now they can deploy this AP even more effortlessly. Um, Deploying through cloud management was effortless already, and now deploying in the field is also effortless, if I may say.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, and I've already had a customer tell me about how excited they are about this. It doesn't seem that exciting if you're into the kind of the standards and the Wi-Fi technology itself, but somebody's actually got to go and put these things up on a wall and replace the ones that were there before. It's pretty labor intensive. To do that, and especially so if you have to change the bracket that actually attaches to the wall as well. So 15 years, that's pretty impressive. That's a good story when we think about trying to operate in a more sustainable way. We were talking about that a couple of episodes ago in terms of data centers and sensors. And sustainability covers so many different areas, but essentially if we're reducing effort and we're reducing time and money being spent and energy being spent, it's a good thing. So I'm loving that.
Yeah, and since you mentioned sustainability, right? We have added a USB port. Um, and that's a new for the MR access points. I don't think the access points, the Meraki access points have had a USB port before, and that's a very new one. We're looking forward to enabling additional applications using
Hmm.
the USB port. One such we've already enabled with our partnership with SES Imagotag. Um, the SES Imagotag partnership, though, is using our inbuilt Bluetooth Low Energy radio, which we're now calling as IoT radio. but that enables customers to deploy digital shelf labeling
Oh,
and
wow.
leverage the IoT radio. And with the USB, that can be expanded to even more applications that can drive sustainable, initiatives for our customers. So really keeping that green initiative for our customers in mind and providing a scalable way to help our customers. Not to mention the cost savings, because if you don't need to deploy a secondary Ethernet cable just to deploy an additional gateway for some of these things, that's cost saving for our customers too.
It is absolutely, and reducing boxes has always been part of our mantra, and I love hearing about this because this is just reminding me of some of the other ways in which we are opening up the Meraki platform to enable others to build on top of it and to come up with innovative new uses for the technology. We talked about a couple of those on the podcast. We've got more coming on that as well. The APIs also enable that to happen, and so it's amazing the size and breadth of the technology partner community now that we have, really taking advantage of what Meraki provides as a platform for their own development. So super excited about
Yes.
that area.
So I know we've talked about the universal mount and the USB port, but the actual product, I think I want to take a minute to talk about the actual specs of the product.
Yes.
And I think it's a penta radio architecture. That means it has 5 radios. And so it has the standard 2.456 gigahertz radios for client connectivity. But it also has our dedicated scanning radio, which can do all 3 bands, by the way, 2.456 gigahertz, and the dedicated Bluetooth low energy radio that I mentioned, or the IoT radio that I mentioned. So it's a penta radio architecture that is available. And one additional thing that's actually coming with the AP is that 6 gigahertz AP can be used as either a 5 gigahertz or a 6 gigahertz AP. What that means is there are 2 modes that this AP can be used in, 2.455 and a 2.456. So if you don't have a lot of 6 gigahertz devices today, that's fine. You can use it in 2.455 mode or dual 5 gigahertz mode, which also, by the way, is a net new feature on the Meraki product line. Or you can, go to 2.456 and support the new 6 gigahertz devices. So no matter which
Right.
bucket you fall under, there's investment protection for today and, future proofing your network for tomorrow.
That's really nice. I like that we're considering that. And yeah, I mean, like you said, if we're only able to support certain brand new devices with this standard, then it makes sense, rather than having to keep on replacing those APs all the time, to just be able to flip the mode that the thing is working in once you hit a critical mass of devices in your enterprise. So that makes good sense as well.
Yeah, and the last thing is, I think, as I mentioned, a lot of these use cases are supporting now critical services, and having the network up and available is critical. And in order to ensure that we are able to support our customers provide this, we are adding a dual PoE as well. The dual PoE provides a lot of interesting, or supports a lot of interesting use cases, because the first thing is, now you can have 2 PoE ports plugging into the AP.
Right.
So if one goes down, the other one can power the AP. And that way, your Wi-Fi stays up, and any services that are running on the Wi-Fi stay up, so that redundancy is provided to the last mile connectivity as well. The other factor is, obviously now you have a whole new radio going into the AP, and the power consumption is going to increase. So a fully functional AP with a USB port obviously needs higher power, and it needs 802.3 BT or UPoE power. And customers may not have switches for that. And switching upgrades might be another thing that you may have to think about. And so if customers want to delay the switching upgrades, they can use the dual PoE while they upgrade the switches. And that's one other consideration also. Um, for customers that don't want to use USB, this AP can operate in PoE Plus with all the Wi-Fi radios and the scanning and the IoT radio. So It's one of the few APs on the market that can actually do that at the premium end. So that's definitely a pro there. But if customers want to use USB, there's a couple of options. They can either use a BT single port, or they can use dual PoE to combine the power and also get the redundancy at the same time.
Wow, all bases covered. And I like that story as well. You know, again, talking about sustainability, we want to make sure we get the lifetime out of our assets that we've invested in. And switches, although they don't get as much love as Wi-Fi, I mean, they're so vital to all of this capability behind the scenes. And of course, you know, you may not want to replace switches at the same time as the access point. So, you know, it sounds as though we've got a pathway once again, same as with the client support. For customers as they evolve their own infrastructure. So that's really nice. You know what? I've got a question around the USB port. This is USB-C?
No, this is a USB-A, I believe.
Okay.
That's what they call it.
You know, the question I always get asked about these whenever we include those is, can I charge my phone with it?
The USB port will be off by default, and network admins have to turn it on. We explicitly don't want to use this port to charge phones because then you'll have wires hanging off of the ceilings with charging ports hanging off of them. That's not a good sight.
Not recommended. Definitely not recommended. Okay, well, I love what you've told me about this this product. It sounds as though it's a lot of thought has gone into making it the best possible option for customers, both in terms of supporting the new extension to the standard, but also just in terms of the practicality of deploying it as well. And thank you for reminding me about the old scanning radio. We've been talking about that since I started with Meraki, which is an embarrassingly long time ago now. And it's easy to forget that in itself, you know, carries quite some value when it comes to ensuring that your Wi-Fi network is operating in the way that you had intended it to, and that you're able to detect any potential threats that are coming onto that Wi-Fi network as well. So it's great to see that living on as well. All right, Sunmeel, that's been an amazing run through. We've done it very rapidly. We've got it. It's half an hour, and we've learned everything we need to know about the new standard, and we've learned which access point we should be putting up on the wall as well. So thank you for coming along and spending some time with us. What would you recommend for anybody who's interested in learning more?
Reach out to our sales team, see, try, buy. You know, we'll be showcasing this at Cisco Live as well. It's a very popular AP. Our sales team are excited. We are excited. We've opened up orderability, and you know, the product starts shipping next month.
So in April.
And so definitely, you know, look forward to, you know, talking to your sales team and asking for more details.
Love it. Sunmeel, thanks for taking time out for your second go around on the Meraki Unboxed podcast. It's been great to have you with us again.
Same here. It's always fun. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to, you know, any more podcasts that we can do.
Oh yeah, we'll think of something. There's always something new. That's what you can be sure of. So thank you to you, everybody listening, for joining us on this episode. We've learned a lot on this one, and I'm so excited about Wi-Fi. It's amazing to me the way it just keeps on evolving over time, and as we've said, with the new devices that we're all addicted to, that we use for our work, you know, we want to have as much performance as we can, and so it's inevitable that that the infrastructure's got to move with the times as well. So as we indicated there, we will be showing this off at Cisco Live in Las Vegas in June. We're super excited to be getting back into in-person events again, and obviously we would love to meet you. So if you're coming to an event, if you're coming to a show, let us know. We'd love to talk to you, see what you think of what you've seen. Also, as far as the podcast is concerned, as I always say, if you've got any ideas for episodes, content you would like us to cover, or if you'd like to be on the show yourself, do reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter, where my handle is @MerakiSimon. And I would love to hear from you. We always get some really interesting feedback about the show, and it's so great to see the audience staying consistent. So thank you very much for being a subscriber to the podcast. If you're new here, welcome, welcome. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and bye-bye for now.